There's been mixed reaction to South Africa's 11.4 billion rand World Bank loan, which was acquired last week. The government says the loan is a boost for the economy, while others are concerned about a possible compromise to the country's economic policy sovereignty. To get clearer answers on the matter, I'm now joined by the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana. And of course, you can be a part of the conversation tonight. Send us your WhatsApp questions and comments to 072-110-5584 or tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. Minister, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Following the announcement of the Treasury initially in 2020 saying we will look at the facility being made available by the IMF, BRICS, as well as the World Bank. Reaction from your alliance partners, the SACP in particular, was quite sharp, especially towards Treasury, saying this Treasury is proving to be quite conservative and a right-wing part of government. And I'm sure they are certainly not as excited, in fact, probably quite clearly opposed to you going to the World Bank to get this loan. What would you say to respond to them on the rationality of you wanting to look at this concessional loan?
Good evening, Thabo, and good evening to your viewers. As we table a budget, we table it with asserting how much revenue we're going to collect and how much are we going to spend. In all circumstances, the amount we are going to spend is bigger than the revenue we're going to collect. Therefore, we go to the market. When we go to the market, we go and raise money for three things. The first one is to raise money to close that gap between revenue and the expenditure in that fiscal year. The second component of that is debt service cost of the previous years. A third component of that is debt redemption, is the redemption of those that have the debt that has matured. That constitutes what is called the borrowing requirements of government. What then do? You go to the market and look for two things that come to mind when you do that. What are going to be the terms of the loan and how much it's going to cost? So it's time to reason that the first thing you're going to look for is the loan that's going to be cheaper for you. Now, let me come to the case in point. The World Bank has made provision for what it called development policy loan to all its member countries at concessional rates. And as South Africa, as part of the broader borrowing requirements of South Africa, we utilize this opportunity to approach the World Bank. We've also approached other multinational institutions, the African Development Bank, the New Development Bank, which is called the BRICS Bank. By the way, the New Development Bank gave us $1 billion. So it's not the first one.
Yeah.
So this loan, we have approached the World Bank, and is a development policy loan which is provided on a concessional basis to member countries. And let me stop there.
So let's take that a little bit further then, Minister. So you are saying as part of the borrowing requirements of the country, is something that you had to do. But many are arguing the fact that if you look at our debt to GDP ratio, we are already borrowing way too much. In fact, as you put it, you've already gone to the Development Bank and you've borrowed some money. You've gone to the IMF, you've borrowed some money. And why are we borrowing again? And in the context of our spending, 2 trillion rands budget, what is 11.5 billion rands really going to do?
11.5 billion is part of the is adding to a borrowing requirement. Let me give you the figures, Thabo. In this fiscal year, our borrowing requirements are going to be 630 billion rand. 510 billion rand of that is going to be domestic. So we've got kind of a prudent borrowing procedure where we focus more in terms of the bulk of the debt requirement, and the borrowing must be in domestic currencies in South Africa. So in the scheme of things, 11 billion rand is a small percentage of that 630 billion rand.
Now, there are those who are saying, why go for it? I mean, SAFTU in particular sharply saying you have built enough reserves. You said the commodities sector did very well in 2021 to your surprise. So there are enough reserves. Why go borrow?
There are no reserves. That's where you are making the mistake. There are no reserves. We tabled adjustment estimates late last year. In the adjustment estimate, we stated absolutely clear that what we received an additional revenue as a result of the commodity boom have already been wiped out by a number of pressures during the course of the year, including the unrest. That was presented in Parliament. I don't know why people don't, maybe they don't listen when we make this happen. That money has already been wiped out.
And therefore, what is the repayment capacity of South Africa? Our ability to repay this loan generated in foreign currency?
Let me just say there's a confusion in this debate, which we should clear. There's a confusion as to whether South Africa should borrow in the first place, which I say that was tabled in Parliament. Everybody knew that we were going to borrow, precisely because we tabled that as we're transparent in that regard, and say when we table the budget, here is the amount that is available, which we're going to spend. Here's the revenue that we're going to collect. Here is the difference. Here are the debt service costs. All of that is part of the documentation we present to Parliament. So let's let's put that aside. The second set of issues is the 750 million. People are saying we were going to borrow in any event. Then people are saying, but why would you go to the World Bank? The answer is the World Bank provided us with the cheapest loan, and there's no way we couldn't take it. And secondly, the terms are very good, generous terms. For example, we're going to pay that $750 million over a 13-year period. By the way, we'll be having, before we do that, a repayment holiday of 3 years. In other words, for the next 3 years, we're not going to be paying this service in this test. We'll do so in the 4th year.
Yeah.
So it's quite a generous loan for us, and it helps us in our debt reduction strategy.
Yes. What is the thinking behind this generosity? Because people are saying, why are you willingly leading the country into this foreign debt trap? These loans comes with terms and conditions, naturally.
There's no one gives you a loan without terms, and most terms will be is undertaking to repay the loan. That's all that is being we're talking about here.
There is no sense, as far as Treasury is concerned, that these are Western powers trying to dictate the policy direction of emerging markets?
No, you have also missed my earlier point. You've also missed my earlier point that our strategy for our borrowing requirements is an 85-15 split. What that means, 85% of our borrowing is domestic, only 15% is foreign. It's part of that strategy. So you can't have 15% of the people who determining the costs against 85%.
Yeah. But that also, are you suggesting, therefore, that the domestic borrowing is benign and therefore it doesn't matter? I mean, it also adds, does it not, Minister, to the greater borrowing?
Let me just say, that of what, if the debate is the following, which is, I suspect, is a confusion. If the debate is the rate at which we are borrowing, our debt service costs are growing because our debt is rising, I would concede that is a worrying situation in my view. We've made that point. For instance, our debt service costs are already high. As a result, for instance, our debt service costs are higher than the health budget. So that should be worrying if people are talking about the size of the debt, not a specific loan. The debate changes.
It changes, particularly when you consider the waste and inefficiencies in government spending, that we are going yet again to borrow money that many people are fearing would be wasted, and we would not even be able to repay this, and we will be indebting generations and generations of our children to be paying these loans.
We tend to conflate all of these debates. First, it was $750 million US. Then we demonstrate its level of insignificance in the scope of borrowing requirements. I concede that the rate at which we're increasing the debt is a problem. But if we are bringing whether the efficiency of spending is the issue, let's have that debate. But let's not confuse all of this debate whether the 750, the efficiency of spending. Those are separate debates that need to be pursued. I would agree.
Yeah, because these issues, Minister, they all come together, right? They are separate departmental issues around the 750 billion, around 750 million, around the broader borrowing, and also around the fact that it would be okay if we were borrowing, but if we were using the borrowing effectively.
Let's agree for now. I mean, let's agree so that I should focus on the efficiency of spending. If the two of us are agreed that the 750 million borrowing was necessary in the circumstances and is not something, is part and parcel of our budget policy and our borrowing requirements, let's put that aside. Let this then come as to whether and debate the efficiency of spending.
All right, let's stay with the 750 million then, Minister. When we come back from the break, I'll ask for another 5 minutes from you, and then we'll wrap up this conversation. Minister of Finance there, Enoch Godongwana, on this matter of the World Bank loan of 11.5 billion rands. The Finance Minister, mixed reaction to the 11.5 billion rands loan, as the Minister explaining that this is part of the broader debt or borrowing requirement that the country has, and this is clearly articulated and explained when the budget is tabled, that this is how much we are going to borrow. So really quite insignificant in the broader scheme of how much we are borrowing, according to the Minister. But Minister, of course, the big question then becomes, how are we going to be spending this now 11.5 billion, if you want us to just focus on that? Is the spending, or is this borrowing going to in any way yield economic, financial, or even social results, and when? Sorry, Minister, you're muted. If you can unmute for us there.
Let me start by saying, from the World Bank's perspective, the amount we've got is not geared to any specific program. Therefore, it helps us to address some of those social programs, to address the vulnerable communities, to address poverty and inequality in our city, to assist businesses. So we are at liberty and we have the flexibility to use this money to meet both economic and social objectives of the government.
So in a sense, you are going to be spending this by and large on the social net, safety net programs, Is that what you're saying? And many are arguing to say, I mean, why borrow to spend on consumption as opposed to spending on the harder sector in as far as investment is concerned, like infrastructure?
Let me just say, when you table a budget, you table a budget meeting broad objectives. Among other things, is investment in productive activity, which includes infrastructure. Other objectives are redistributive. In other words, you are saying part of what we need to know to do is to support those members of our society who are subject to vulnerabilities. So your broader your fiscal policy is about meeting objectives as broad as those.
And has Treasury then looked at the risk of rent depreciation, this being also a dollar-denominated debt that we are taking here? Many are saying, well, you'll end up paying twice here. You'll end up repaying the loan, but also making payment that would come from our devaluing rand.
In the scheme of things, you borrow in different currencies because part of even the debt that you are going to service, in some of it is in foreign currency. Let me put this point. That's why we have this 85-15 split. It's precisely because to safeguard ourselves against these currency fluctuations so that your exposure to currency fluctuation is very limited. But you still need foreign currency to deal with a foreign denominated debt.
How are you going to ring-fence this amount from corruption? It goes into a bigger pool of money.
There's nothing called ring-fencing something against corruption in government. There's nothing called that like that because it's not practical possible. The question is, what measures are we developing not only against this particular specific amount? What measures are we developing as government to deal with corruption general? And government has been putting a number of things, pieces in place to ensure that we can deal with corruption. There is, of course, a number of things. We've got to make sure that we can deal with those that are corrupt and first, they must exit the system. B, they must end up in jail. Those are all the things that are necessary that needs to be done to deal with the corrupt conduct.
All right. Minister, while I have you here, thank you very much for your indulgence. I've kept you far beyond the time that you have allocated for us. Completely unrelated to this, when will the Chrome or tax announcement that you made 14 months ago be implemented?
14 months ago, I was not in government.
Well, the Treasury announced 14 months ago.
14 months ago, I was not in government. I'm not entirely sure whether we are going to impose a Chrome tax or not. As I'm sitting here, it's not on my desk. So it's not part of those things that are top of my list.
Minister, we appreciate your time and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Finance Minister there, Enoch Godongwana.